Hello, everyone. Welcome. And this um, artist, Jack Whitten, is an extraordinary uh, person. If you have the chance to listen to any of the YouTubes that are out there of interviews with him, it's well worth it because he's quite a interesting visionary fellow. Um, he died in 2018. Um, so this exhibition that's going to be at MoMA um, is about 150 paintings, sculptures, and works on paper. Um, Whitten created visionary beauty from righteous anger. He was born in Bessemer, Alabama, amid the violence of the segregated South, and basically met Martin Luther King and was very impressed with him and joined the civil rights movement. Um, but one of the things that he saw in some of the protests that he was involved in was how intensely the opposition was there. This the intensity of that violence um, made him know he needed to leave because it was making him so angry that he felt that he would turn to violence himself. So basically, let's see. Let me do a bit of a bio on him. Um, he was born in Bessemer. His parents, his father was a coal miner. His mother a domestic, and basically he was the only person in the family to have gone to college at that point. Um, he he actually went to Tuskegee, joined the Air Force, and went to Tuskegee. He was studying pre med, and realized sitting in the seat during the first, I don't know, the first 6 months that he was there, he just realized this is not for me. I need to move on, and actually left Tuskegee and went to what the heck was it? Southern. It was it was the university in Baton Rouge. Um, and I can't remember the name of it right now, but um, anyway, uh, he went there and
Louisiana
started
State
studying art.
University.
What?
Louisiana State University.
Yeah, Louisiana State. That's right. And he basically was there for a year or two, um, went to New York and worked during the summers, um, and realized that was more the atmosphere that he wanted to be in. So he left um, Baton Rouge and went up to New York and applied to Cooper Union and got in, which is no small feat. Uh, that's it's a pretty substantial human being that can pick themselves up from that kind of background and throw themselves into New York City. Um, so okay, we're going to start moving along. Um, Whitten revolutionized what art can look like through his exploration of paint and pigment, his ingenious application of tools and technologies from afro combs to electrostatic printing. Whitten created novel artistic processes through his unflinching confrontation with racial prejudice and technological change. He made art matter in a world in turmoil. Whitten said, in many ways, I don't paint paintings any longer. I build them. And you can see this is skipping a lot of things, and I'm gonna cover the background to get us to here, but this is some of his late work that you're seeing here. And on the right is a detail of one of um, his acrylic mosaic paintings that includes molasses, copper, salt, coal, ash, chocolate, onions, herb, rust, eggshell. Um, so he was quite interested in shifting how you construct a painting in many ways. And here is I'm gonna actually, let's see if I can get the detail up. Eh, don't see my zoom again. Here we go. All right. So this is a zoom in on how he created this is basically um, he would lay down um, uh, on 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 plastic um, um, up to a quarter-inch thick layer of acrylic and let it dry, and then cut these grids out of that to create the mosaic tiles. The other thing that I want to bring in early on talking about this fellow is his love of music, of jazz. Vibrations for Milt Jackson. Basically, if you know anything about jazz, Milt Jackson was a great vibraphonist with the Modern Jazz Quartet. Um, and one of the things that out of that pre-med stuff, Whitten was very much interested in science, in mathematics, um, and actually fractals and the golden mean really enter in at an early stage. The Fibonacci business and the natural forms that he was kind of interested in. At the same time, he was actually a sax player. When he got to New York, he said in 1960, when he got to New York, he went to the jazz clubs and quickly knew that he was outclassed, that there was no way that he was ever going to get to what he was hearing in those clubs. And he sold his sax and just stuck with painting, which was a good choice for us. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit so you can see this close up. Gets a little blurry when you do it this way, but you get the idea. Okay. So this is a photo from Jack Whitten's actually from his studio. Um, and I grew up at the height of the Jim Crow era. Um, I grew up in an environment that was separate from white people. It was described as separate but equal, but but in truth, it was separate but never equal. The buses had signs white on the front and colored on the back. You couldn't go into restaurants You could walk through a park in Bessemer, but you couldn't sit down. I grew up under severe conditions, what I call American apartheid. And this is a picture of his family. And basically you get the idea. It was a pretty hard scrabble life. It's remarkable coming out of that he um picked himself up and put himself into college. And by the way, when he dropped out of Tuskegee, his he said his mother wept inconsolably. Okay. This is from 1964. This is a pastel by Whitten. Um, and it I I I I think it's a self-portrait. I would say that. Um, very expressionistic. He was exposed coming to New York to a lot of contemporary artists, and he knew Willem de Kooning. He Down below you see a one of Pollock's pieces when he was beginning to explore at the end of his life in therapy. He was beginning to explore figurative elements again, and I saw a correlation between the turmoil in this in these portraits. Oop, didn't mean to do that. So this is um, Norman Lewis, who was one of Whitten's mentors on the left, and on the right is again Romar Bearden, who actually they they inter they interacted a lot. This guy really got himself in there really quickly. He got to know all of these black artists and the abstract expressionists. Um, so he got around. Uh, these were both very influential people in his life. Oh, okay, and I'm going to go back one right here. Um, these are very, Martin Luther King's garden in 1968. Now, this is the year that, of course, that Martin Luther King was assassinated. Um, that this um, painting, the turmoil in it, the appearance and disappearance. If you look in it, you can see faces appear and disappear. Um, it 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 reminds me of Hieronymus Bosch. Um, in some ways, the kind of depiction of hell. Um, Homage to Malcolm X. Now, one of the things that I will talk about is he did a lot of sculpture. He actually, um, toward the end of the '60s, he would summer in Crete, and he actually, I believe it was in either the late '60s or early '70s, bought a house on Crete. I see a question here. Let's see. Yeah, yeah. Th there's this play between beauty and 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 turmoil and friction in the work. Okay, and basically, um, Whitten became friends with de Kooning. He talked with him a lot and got a lot out of that relationship. The Boschville. Okay, I brought up Hieronymus Bosch. Well, here it is. Um, uh, Whitten, by the end of the 60s, was feeling overwhelmed by the conditions in the country. The riots that were happening, the things that were going on, were just really getting to him. And he actually sort of had a breakdown and went into therapy for a period of time. So, the dominance of abstract expressionism was kind of counterbalanced by the pop artists, Andy Warhol and Jasper Johns, and all those guys were really on the ascendancy in the 60s. Um, so Whitten had to try and figure out another approach. In He said, I heard him talking about this in one of the lectures. In 1967, he asked John Coltrane, "What was that sound? What's that? What are you doing, man? It's really amazing, but what is it?" And Coltrane, exasperated, said, "It's like a wave, man." Um, and since then it's been called the wall of sound. And what Whitten tried to do with his paintings was create that kind of wall of sound, this business of a piece that comes all at once. Um, the piece, this Birmingham piece from 1964, again, is back to that angst and that the pain of what was going on down there. Okay. Now, one of the influences on Whitten is process art. It's an artistic movement where the end product of the art and craft, the work of art, found object, is not the principal focus. The process of making it is the gathering, sorting, collecting, associating, patterning, and moreover, the intention of actions and application are the artistic experience. The process artists saw art as pure human expression. In process art, the process of creating the work of art can be an art piece itself. So, this pressed space piece is really an oil on paper, but it's a process of frottage, of taking the oil paint and using it over objects underneath it. I'm not sure what, it may have been rags, it may have been something, underneath that piece of paper that he was getting this projection out of. Um, but one of the interesting things is thinks he thought a lot about the idea of of a photographic um, um, quality in these paintings, um, and using that as a abstract underpinning. Okay, and then on these sculptures, he continued to do these sculptures when he went to Greece during the summer. that's basically where he did them, and he left them over there in the house that he owned there. He and his wife went there every year, tried to spend 2 or 3 months at least. And you can see kind of the world um, influence. There's Western art, but there's also African, and there's um, the Greek, archaic Greek influences, and then there's primitive. Basically, these jugheads are something that he would have seen in folk art down south. Okay. Then he moved to this thing called slab paintings that were created with one pull. And I'll show you a little bit more about that. The and again, you have that sense of a blurred photograph out of this, like there's something underneath that surface that you're not quite able to figure out. Um, um, Although Whitten's journals are a record of the artists finding a way to thrive despite feeling uh, that recognition and money were often in short supply. Um, his recurrent themes are elsewhere in basic quasi philosophical concerns of abstract art: space, surface, object, color. Yet he treats these theoretical entities mainly in terms of how to handle them as facts, in terms of technique. For example, a lengthy entry in his journal in 1973, um, the first in which he uses a designation notes from the woodshed. He lays out his methodology for making painting so concretely and in such detail that it could be followed as a recipe. You feel that you could make your own 1973 Whitten. Uh, Hoping to make color and surface synonymous, a new image not bound by geometric repertoire or lyricism. He built a 12 by 20-foot horizontal platform with a 12-foot long squeegee. Um, he would actually place the canvas on this platform, pour the paint at one end, and use the squeegee to pull the paint across the canvas, repeating the process to create a more complicated and layered striation. Um, Yet each pass of the squeegee was a one-shot process. And for this reason, the procedure seemed to give the painting a factual quality of a photograph, a spatial type, a special type of spatial effect, depending on the subject. Um, yeah, basically, he put things underneath the canvas too, to uh, kind of come through. But you'll see. I'll show you more. But these are two early pieces, 1970, and he made some kind of a home-like um, uh, um, tool to get those grooves in that circle. Okay. And here you see him. Basically, that's the giant squeegee that he was using. Whitten used the Greek alphabet as the organizational principle of this landmark yet long overlooked series that consists of variations on abstract black and white compositions and experiments in mark making. So he called all these things experiment, that kind of scientific aspect of it. For these works, the artist employed handmade tools and techniques, including the comb, imprinting, frottage. This was a pivotal moment in Whitten's practice. So you can see kind of underneath the surface of the piece on the left, um, you know, rope and something, it could be that there was cloth underneath it or something like that. I'm not quite sure what. And what he would do is do a dark color underneath and then roll out white paint on the surface and then use the squeegee over the top of it. He'd vary the teeth on the squeegee. He'd make some out of metal, some out of plastic, different configurations. He was always experimenting with that too. And he was not alone in this squeegee approach. Basically, this David Dio was doing this in the early 70s also. And there is Gerhard Richter, who actually is kind of like, known for the squeegee abstract painting, but but in fact, Whitten was doing it long before Gerhard Richter started doing these pieces, which is really interesting. And kind of Richter gets the credit for it, but that's not the truth. And but they're wonderful. I won't take anything away from Gerhard Richter's abstract paintings. I love them, many of them. Um, but let's see. Okay. Whitten not only explored various artistic tools, but also a range of mediums. Following a grant he received from Xerox Corporation in 1970, Whitten made a major discovery. Dried pigment or toner needed no binder, but was made permanent by applying heat, relying heavily on the capacities of Xerox electrostatic printing technology, which allowed him to push traditional visual vocabulary and manipulate the idea of plane and space. So you see this mark making made in different ways. It's one of the things was to try, he was trying to get away from the abstract expressionist business of the handprint of the artist's gesture as this kind of grand heroic um, emotive force. Um, Not that there's no emotion in this fellow's work, but it's very different. Okay, so and basically you see the use of the grid um, a structure to operate within and to break. Um, and the painting on the right was happening at the same time as these experiments with the toner. Um, the dimensionality, the business of of kind of layering of the surface and kind of seeing into another world underneath that surface. Okay. I removed all spectrum color from the studio. I reduced them down to black and white and a range of grays. Um, you have to understand that in getting rid of all the chroma and take to black and white is not just a formal exercise. I'm very much aware of the meaning of black and white in American society, which ref- which informs who I am as an African American. The formal reasons for black and white are one thing, but there are also reasons coming out of the political situation. And I wanted to see if I could combine them. So again, you see him on the left rolling out the white paint over the top of a darker ground, and then you see the striations from his squeegee, and you can see the patterns of things are starting to come more and more to the surface. And this continues the Greek um, uh, alphabet um, series. It's also kind of, celestial, implications of star patterns and things like that, and the static on TV screens. Um, so there's a technological element that he's reflecting in these pieces too. Uh, and then color returns. Um, and still, this business of kind of quasi photographic um, quality to these pieces. Okay. Um, and the pop kind of conceptual ideas. Um, Again, the quasi-scientific. One of the things that brought on this dead reckoning was he said that he would go out on the fishing boats with the guys on Crete, and they'd go out at night fishing, um, and they would find their way back to shore by dead reckoning. Um, so that really intrigued him. Um, and you see these circles on this piece. They are not painted on the surface. They are incised. The color is underneath. And he's like using a giant compass of some sort with some kind of a scraper to pull off the paint and let the under painting show through. Really interesting. And I threw in the Jasper Johns target just to, say, basically he was looking over his shoulder and taking in what was going on there. I mean, the Jasper Johns target was from 1958, 57, something like that. Um, but it still resonated. Okay. And again, um, by the end of the 80s, it was starting to get to be a bit of a drag pulling that squeegee over the surface of the painting, pun intended. And basically what he started to do was do castings from things like some kind of grill or diamond pattern in a grate or something like that. And he would do the layer of paint over that and then take that off and then adhere that to the canvas. That was one of the techniques. So it's kind of like, again, this photographic element, this repetition, this business of taking from the world and transforming it in some way. Mask of God for Joseph Campbell. Really interesting. And you see in the palm of his hand what these um, mosaic, acrylic mosaic pieces look like. They're not exactly even, so they catch light in different ways, and that's a really interesting aspect of it. Um, First Gestalt. So they're really they're very atmospheric pieces. They're dreamy. Um, and here we have Ode to Andy for Andy Warhol. Um, and basically, he did a number of these homage pieces to people who passed away. Um, and as I said, taking this business of repetition, of casting from everyday objects, the industrial and organic, densely layered images um, emerge. And that's the element of Andy Warhol's repeating portraits, repeating images, um, and the playing with that. Okay, and the sculpture that's in here um, is quite a remarkable piece, and the integration of kind of the the fetishistic nails and all that with a piece of a American Express card cut up in there, you know, elements of contemporary life mixed in with this kind of historic, seemingly primitive, mask-like sculpture. Okay. And here we have a whole group of them. And he was, of course, experimenting with this on Crete. So it was kind of like a separate thing from what he was doing when he was in New York. Um, though he loved them and all that, he was really kind of doing them for himself. Um, and I have the cycletic figure and this African sculpture, and you can see how he was influenced by these two forces. Giving me a hard time here. Okay, there we go. All right. So the variety of color. an approach that he took. Um, the integration of found object into his work, um, along with just these increments of translucent or opaque tiles. Um, and this is an homage to Duke Ellington from 1974. And again, predominance of tan, black, and blue. Duke Ellington, it was for the centennial celebration of Duke Ellington, that piece. And again, let's see if I can pull up. I want to close in on this a little bit and see if we can appreciate some of the different kinds of textures that are in here. Piece of fabric, and these are castings and things like that. This very textural, tactile quality to these pieces. There's this whole series of black monoliths, homage to Ralph Ellison, um, uh, and memory sites. So it's kind of like this grappling with the location, um, in memory. Um, Very interesting notions in this guy. He talks about quantum physics and the whole idea of our perception of reality is something very different from what reality is. In a way, nothing is solid. We're molecules moving at various rates of speed. And one of the things that he talks a bit about is trying to see into different dimensions in his work. So this kind of luminous, um, fractal or pixel, um, kind of shimmering quality is something that's really beautiful in these pieces. Um, Again, he built his paintings. There's no paint, no brush in hand. He's adhering these things to the surface. Okay. When the terrorists attacked the World Trade Center occurred, Whitten was at his studio at Lispenard Street in Tribeca. Um, in the following years, he constructed a monumental painting with ashes embedded as a memorial to the day. It's a gigantic painting. It's 120, it's 10 feet by 20 feet. Oh, okay. Didn't mean to go there. All right. Quantum Wall, uh, for Prince. I don't remember this for sure, but I think that was the year that Prince died. So, these are homage paintings. Um, So the materials in this are quite wonderful. Um, Kind of man-made and organic stuff assembled in these kind of beautiful surfaces, the refuse of consumer culture gathered together and reformed kind of on his walks by the sea in Crete. Uh, Powerful presence, the textures and layering, um, variations in approach, basically the kind of atmospheric quality that he's getting out of this kind of figurative uh natural selection. um and then the black monolith. um he did a lot of these homages to um uh Martin Luther King, to Maya Angelou, to jazz artists of all kinds, painters, writers of all stripes. Intricate, that this black monolith is just so complex and textured. Okay. Uh, and this one's just a really beautiful piece. I mean, these are beautiful pieces. The saturation, um, different techniques, how the paint got on there, what was he up to? How did he do this? I didn't find any writing on these pieces. I just loved the color in them, so I threw them in. Um, the work can be delightfully beautiful, and the layering of politics and scientific elements, the textural depth and resonance. This is quite a remarkable artist. Oh, here we are. Black monolith, the birth of Muhammad Ali, and then there's a self-portrait. Ah, so Quantum Wall for Arshil Gorky, my first love in painting. There's a thing about Arshil Gorky, figure ground dimensionality. These forms flip in and out of the ground. They turn inside out. They do all kinds of things. This is something that Whitten philosophically would have loved, but also visually engaged. So that's the story of Jack Whitten as far as I can tell you right now. Go see the show and see some more. There are some really wonderful lectures on YouTube. The Boston University YouTube, School of Visual Arts, Contemporary Perspectives lecture with Jack Whitten. That's a good hour and a half long talk by him. Well worth listening to. So that's it.
Okay. Thank you, Larry. Thank you, everyone, for
Okay.
listening. Have a good week, and the weather's supposed to be much nicer, warmer too. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Bye.
Okay. Bye.